Hey friends, welcome back to the No Wrong Turns podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Audrey Lee Hickman Hunter. The No Wrong Turns podcast talks to people about their story and their passions. It aims to see how their passions have evolved and grown throughout their story. Happy New Year's Eve! If you're listening to this episode on the day that it drops, then it is New Year's Eve, the last day of 2019. 2019 has been quite a year for me. Here are some of my highlights. First would be graduating with my Master's of Divinity from grad school from Moody Theological Seminary. Shout out to you, Mother Moody. Hashtag God bless the school that D.L. Moody founded. Also, another huge feat is that today, December 31st, 2019, marks 1 year that my husband Dietrich and I have been married. So happy first anniversary, Dietrich. And another big highlight for me is to have started this podcast. I wanted to thank all of you, my listeners, cheerleaders, and supporters, and those of you who have shared about my budding baby podcast. Thank you. As this year comes to a close with 2020 upon us, I can't believe I'm saying those words, that year 2020. It's so crazy. I've been starting to ponder what I'm looking forward to and what goals I have for 2020. In my next episode, I'll be sharing with you all a few of those goals. And a little bit later in the podcast, I'll be sharing with you how this week's giveaway sponsor, yes, that is correct. You heard me correctly. Not only do we have a sponsor for this week's episode, but our sponsor is sponsoring our first No Wrong Turns pod giveaway. This sponsor specializes in the goal forming and writing department, and I can't wait to share more details with you later on in the podcast. This is our 4th episode. Today on the podcast, we welcome Macy. I met Macy when she and I were part of the Summer Missions Team program. Yes, this is the same Summer Missions Team that one of our previous guests, Shay, was the director of. Although Macy and I were not on the same team, we got to know each other through the training times before and processing times after our summer mission trips. In this episode, Macy shares about her childhood life, growing up in New Orleans, then her experience of living through Hurricane Katrina that led to her move up north to Minnesota, and now to her most recent move to Chicago. Macy shares with us about how pursuing her passion of teaching children has pivoted her from one vocation to another. You're going to want to lean in and not miss hearing about how Macy found her passion and what vocation she decided to use it in. No matter if this is your story and you can relate to her or not, I believe that there is something in this episode for you. Play song. All right, here's my conversation with Macy. Welcome to the No Wrong Turns podcast. I have Macy, and she is our 4th guest on the No Wrong Turns pod. So welcome, Macy.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you so much for being on my baby podcast here. Can you just introduce yourself to us and maybe tell us who you are, where you're from, and maybe a fun fact or two?
Sure. My name is Macy, and I am from the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. During my 20s or teens to 20s year olds. And then I'm like trying to, but I was born in Louisiana, and after Hurricane Katrina, we moved to Minneapolis. So that's where I've lived most of my adult life so far. And I loved living there. It's a good place besides the cold. And I was trying to think one fun fact about me is that I've done summer mission team twice, and I love that. So I've been to India and Papua New Guinea through that program. So I really enjoyed that.
What was the most interesting thing or different thing that you got to eat when you were in either of those places?
Well, India was always an adventure with the food because you just never knew. A lot of their food, actually, where I was pretty spicy, which I don't know if that's common in all parts of India, but like actual spicy, not just spices. So I think actually the most interesting thing we ate there was probably their traditional meal, just because of there's a certain way to eat it, and like you have to use you have to do it step by step, and that was the most interesting part of it, and especially if you didn't like a flavor in the certain steps. So it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But in Papua New Guinea, we ate this like slimy slug type thing. Oh, it was nasty.
Was it alive?
No, it wasn't alive, but it was definitely disgusting, and I couldn't get it down. I don't think it was actually a bug, but it kind of reminded me like of a fat slug. Ugh, so gross.
Yeah.
I don't.
I have never had slug, so I trust your opinion there. It's probably, an acquired taste or a taste from
I'm
birth.
sure.
So you said you lived in Louisiana. Can you tell us a little bit how that was like living in the southern parts? I've never been to Louisiana, so could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I grew up there, and I lived with my mom and dad and sister and brother. My dad was not very consistent in our lives, so it was mostly my mom and my sister and brother. We didn't really have a very good life there, actually, just because my parents, they kind of struggled a lot, and I loved living in Louisiana and the like culture of Louisiana, and especially the food. But in our home life,
No
that
slugs.
was no slugs. That's right. A lot of seafood, but no slugs. We definitely struggled a lot growing up. I didn't even know what Christianity was really most of my childhood. Most of the time I lived there, or even knew who Jesus was. And my mom struggled a lot taking care of us, and at some points she didn't know how to take care of us well. So we did end up living in foster care for a couple of years. But she did get us back eventually, and did try hard. But it was just hard being a mom for her. So yeah, that's kind of like my childhood mostly, I guess.
So when you moved to Minnesota, was it you and your siblings and your mom and your dad, or just the four of you?
It was just the four of us at that point. My dad had been out of the picture for a little while by that time. He really struggles. Well, he did, especially then, struggled with being involved in things that weren't good for him or for us. And he eventually did join us in Minnesota, but it was later on. But we came to Minnesota, just the four of us, after we lost everything, our home and everything where we lived in Louisiana.
Could you walk us through that transition time, like from like the Hurricane Katrina to how you got to Minnesota?
Yeah. So it was in 2005 that Hurricane Katrina happened. And me, my brother and sister, and my mom, we were living there. And I remember when they were talking about that this hurricane was coming through, and they suggested that everyone leave. But my mom decided that we would stay. And so we lived on like the first floor. Our apartment was a first floor apartment only. And then above us was another apartment. The nighttime through the first night was a lot of storms and rain that came. And then by morning time, our apartment was already starting to flood. And so me and my mom were trapped in the apartment just because of the pressure. We couldn't get the door open because of the water pressure.
So where were your siblings?
Yeah, they were upstairs at a neighbor's house. So not directly upstairs, but just at a friend's house, just hanging out for the night, because they thought it was an adventure because we're all having a sleepover. But I stayed downstairs. And
wait, I have one more question for you. Sorry to keep interrupting.
No, that's
how
okay.
old were you at this time?
I was 12.
Okay, and then how old were your siblings?
My brother was 13 and my sister was 10.
Okay.
10. Yeah. So they actually had to come, the neighbor directly above us had to come down and kick the door open in order for us to get out. And then when we did stay upstairs at that apartment. And the waters did just keep coming. And at one point, our whole apartment was underwater. And as we were upstairs, the kind of crazy part of this is that these neighbors upstairs, they didn't have any furniture in their house really, except for a bed. It was weird. So a lady and a guy that were together, and they only had a bed, but they had like 30 black cats. She had a thing with black cats. And so in the cabinets, if you can picture in a kitchen, all the cabinets are wide open and all the cats are in the cabinets just hanging out, and it was like there's poop and pee everywhere. It was just disgusting. Just
it probably was
ingrained,
a bit stinky.
yeah, ingrained in my memory. And but at that, when we were up there, we didn't think that we would be up there forever, but slowly the water just kept rising and kept rising. And then that's when I really got scared, because I realized for us, there was no more up. Like we couldn't get we couldn't go up any further. So like whatever happened was going to happen, and the water wasn't stopping. So that was a little bit of a terrifying moment. Also, that was a moment where I felt a lot of peace as well. I think I know it sounds weird, but when you think about, I might die today, you often think about where you're going to go after you die. And that was the first thing I thought. And I just felt this overwhelming peace that it was going to be okay. And I knew, like later looking back, I knew that was the first time that I felt the Holy Spirit with me. And I knew that the Lord was going to, even though I didn't really know anything about being a Christian or what that meant, I knew I was going to be okay. So late that night. So this is probably like early in the morning, like into the afternoon. But the water just kept coming. And then late into the night, we noticed the water was slowing down. And then a rescue boat eventually did come get us. And then me, my sister, and my mom, we were transported to a hospital, and my brother was left behind because there wasn't enough room. And he's only 13 at this time, so he was scared probably. We went to a hospital where we had to be lifted onto the roof to get into the hospital, and inside of there was people in the hallways on the floor laying down. And remember when I was talking about those cats and how it smelled? Yeah, that's the same smell was there. Like these older people weren't being changed out of their diapers or anything. I can just smell like awfulness everywhere. The next day we were transported to a juvenile center where the inmates were taken already out, and that's where we stayed for the day until later that evening we were taken on a ferry. Eventually my brother did come back with us when we were in the jail. They eventually found us.
I was going to ask you, what about your brother?
Yeah. And and when you're in the middle of a disaster, you don't have any time to prepare. So he wasn't wearing any shoes, and so a helicopter was landing, and his foot got sliced open. So he then had to have my flip flops that I had on. So then when we were going on the ferry, there was like this graded metal, so you couldn't really walk on it. So the firefighter had me on his back and was carrying me to the boat. Just like so many moments where you think like, wow, I like think back to that and how good people were to us. And that's when we were transported to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we stayed in a shelter for about a month, and then later on relocated to Minnesota. So kind of
did you have any possessions or anything with you?
No, not anything but the clothes we had on at that point. When we did get to the shelter, they did give us they had donated clothes, so they did give us clean clothes so we could shower. And in this shelter that we were in, it was just like an office type building, so we were like sleeping in the hallways of this building until they made this like stadium that you could sleep in the arena area. But once they started pushing us towards that's when we ended up relocating to Minnesota and getting out of there, which was a good point to get going.
How long did it take you to get from when Hurricane Katrina happened to get to Minnesota?
It was probably a month and a half total that we were between when the hurricane happened and relocating. It took a little while. And we were just the beginning. We were like phase 1 of getting us to Baton Rouge. We were like the first people to be there in that shelter. And so I knew that meant for a lot of other people that it would be a long journey for them. So it's difficult.
And how did they choose, or how did you choose Minnesota?
My mom had her great aunt lived in Minnesota, and she called her and she asked her if we could come, and she said, sure, come, and you guys can stay with me. And so that's how we got our beginning marks here.
Because I was thinking Minnesota's kind of like almost the opposite of Louisiana,
yes.
like weather and climate wise. Yeah. Okay, now I get how you got there. Okay.
Well, later on, when the Salvation Army, because that's how I met the Salvation Army, is through this process too.
Okay.
They had talked about that there weren't many people that relocated to Minnesota, so they were surprised, which isn't surprising because it's cold. So
very true. So how did you meet the Salvation Army during this process?
Well, as we were living there, my mom was trying to figure out what she could do to get some help because we really didn't have anything at that
living
point.
In Minnesota or Baton Rouge?
In Minnesota at this now. She was trying to figure out how we could get help to start over, and I think she found out the Salvation Army was partnering with Target to do like a coat/clothing distribution, and so we went. And then some volunteers, the volunteer that shopped with me was a member of a Salvation Army Corps in the city, or a Salvation Army church in the city. And she was telling me about it as she was shopping with me. I didn't really understand what she was saying, but I just knew that she was nice. And so we got what we needed, and we left, and they eventually called us back and was like, hey, we have a ton of stuff left over. You guys should come back and get some more things, because we didn't have as many people as we expected to have, which is what relates back to what I was saying. And so we went back, and then I think not that long later, we got an invitation in the mail to go to camp with the Salvation Army, and we ended up going, and then they invited us to church, and so me and my brother and sister started going to the church there, and that's kind of how our beginning started with the Salvation Army. And they were very intentional with us, and took care of us well, especially in a season when we didn't have very much at all. So
that's good. Awesome. Did you live close to the Salvation Army, or?
No, we didn't. They would actually come and pick us up every time we went to church. So on Sunday, on Wednesday, on teen program nights, they would always come and pick us up. And it was a good 20-25-minute drive.
Wow, so, that's awesome.
Yeah, they were really good to us.
So after you were getting resettled and kind of getting into a new kind of life up in Minnesota, you were in what grade? Sixth grade or seventh grade?
Sixth grade.
So then you went to school, middle school, high school, and then you went to college. And what did you went to college in Minnesota, right?
Yes.
Was that a hard decision to make, or you knew you wanted to stay in Minnesota?
No, I knew I wanted to stay in Minnesota. By that time I was ready to leave home. Well, I had been ready to leave home for a while, but I knew that I wanted to leave, and I knew I wanted to go to college, and I absolutely knew I wanted to go to Christian college. So I just looked up all the Christian colleges in Minnesota, in the area, and I applied to the top 5 that I thought I'd be interested in going to, and then ended up picking North Central University. The finances worked out better there.
So why did you want to only go to a Christian college?
That's a good question. So, at that time, in my teen years, there was a lot going on. There was a lot, when I was in foster care, when we were younger, we experienced a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma that came with being in foster care and living with the people we lived with. But my mom was not in a good place, in a healthy place to take care of us, and she really struggled, and that came with a lot of abuse and moments where I didn't want to be in that environment, and none of us did, but I really just felt uncomfortable, and I ran away a few times, but it kept bringing me back. So
Wow.
yeah. So I knew when I was old enough to leave and to get out of the house, I knew that I wanted to not be anything like my parents. And because they didn't love the Lord and they didn't make good choices, I knew I wanted to go in the opposite direction. So it only made sense for me because I'd been growing so much at this point in my faith that I wanted to grow more and to be foundationally sound in what it meant to be a Christian and to live like that. So I felt like going to a Christian college would help me would help guide and direct me into the person I was hoping to be and who God created me to be. And so that's the main reasoning why I wanted to go to a Christian college. So.
Okay. Another follow-up question. So
Mm-hmm.
when did you, I guess I should have asked this before this, but when did you become a believer?
Yeah, so it was pretty quick after we started going to the Salvation Army Church, the core.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Friday night, and they had kind of like prayer and praise night for teens and younger adults, but they
Oh,
called it
fun.
something different back then. And I went, and someone was preaching a message on like God loving us, just a basic salvation message. And I knew that what I knew was that I wasn't loved or didn't feel like I was loved properly growing up or even at that moment because people who love you wouldn't treat you the way that I was being treated. And so I wanted to know what this love was and who this God was that showed this kind of love. So that night I accepted Jesus for the first time, and I knew that meant leaving everything else behind and like fully trusting him and leaving shame behind and leaving hurt behind. There had to be a lot of healing still in my life um, after my childhood, but in that moment I knew that I was going to be okay, and I knew that the Lord took me in and called me his own. So that was a special time for me, and that was when I was 12 still. So
Oh, wow. So then almost like half of middle school and all of high school was like preparing you to help decide what kind of college environment you wanted to have.
yeah, that's exactly right.
So what was your degree that you chose, and how did you decide to pursue that?
So through middle school and high school at the core, they would often ask me if I wanted to help with the kids programs or help volunteer, mostly through middle school. And then in high school, we had gotten a new youth director, and they did summer program, summer day camp, and she was doing. You could be a leader for that, and that really instilled in me like, oh, I really love working with kids, and I think that I loved working with them a lot because I knew I could create a safe environment for them, and that was something I
Hmm.
lacked as a child so often. And so that's what I wanted. Like I knew that it didn't matter. Kids weren't going to learn unless they were in an environment where it was safe for them to learn. So that meant making
Hmm.
sure that they had food and they weren't hungry. Because when kids grow up in poverty or grow up in abusive homes, like they're in survival mode. They're not trying to learn. All they're trying to do is survive. And I wanted to make
Hmm.
sure they had those foundational pieces to just being a kid, and so that they can learn well. And so that really kind of sparked the passion for children and wanting to teach them. And so when I went to college, I got a degree in elementary education, so
Hmm.
that teaching kindergarten through sixth graders. And I loved my clinicals and I loved my student teaching, and I knew that God had me where he wanted me, and that it was going to be good. And so that I continued through that, and then eventually graduated. But as I was going through college, I also worked at the Corps. And I was a youth worker, so I worked at the Corps and was an RA and did school. So I really had a balancing act some years. Yeah. Some years it was like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But it really, yeah, but it really prepared me for like where I am even today. And even going into my youth director position job. And I love ministry and I love teaching. I think that was a huge thing for me too, because I learned that I love ministry with children. I one time said, "Oh, I don't want to go into church ministry because I want to teach kids." And my officer said to me, "Well, you are teaching kids in this environment, in this aspect. You're just teaching them about Jesus and not about the basics, math and science and things like that." And that really changed my mindset, and it's like, that's what I need to be doing. I need to be teaching them about Jesus, and that's what they need to know. Like, they need to know how much God loves them, and I can show them that through me loving them too.
Wow. Was this the same Salvation Army church that you went to when you were growing up? Is the same one you went to in college, or was it different?
It was actually a different one, because the one that I grew up going to was like 30 minutes away from my college or more. And then this one that I started working at was about a 10-minute drive from my college. So the office, I actually wasn't going. Like, at first I started school and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go to the Salvation Army or go to a church connected to my university. And the officer actually called me and she said, "Hey, we are needing help with our kids program. We heard that you're really good with kids. Would you be interested in volunteering?" And I was like, sure. And I was like, "But I don't have a car, so if you can pick me up, that would help me a lot." And that really is what started the connection. And even some of my college roommates ended up working there as well. So,
wow,
eventually.
That's awesome. They got to you.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
They did.
So you graduated. In what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 2017.
2017. And what was your job? Did you have a job set up for after college? I know you said you were a youth director during college.
Well, I was actually a youth worker during college, and just like an assistant to the youth director they already had there. And then after I knew I was going to be graduating soon, so I had lined up a job to teach in Arizona kindergarten. And I was really excited about that.
We have our first sponsored giveaway here on the No Wrong Turns pod, and I could not be more excited. I don't know if you can tell through my voice or not. Our sponsored giveaway is from a company called Cultivate What Matters. Cultivate What Matters is a company that creates products to help lead people through the process of finding what truly matters to them and then how to do something about it. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by everything on your plate and disappointed when you're not spending time doing the things you love and caring for the people you love. You want to leave the overwhelm behind and finally make progress on your goals with joy. Is that even possible? Cultivate What Matters was created to give you the community, resources, and encouragement to realize that you can make great things, big or small, happen. The 3-step proven process in the Cultivate What Matters best-selling tool, the Power Sheets Intentional Goal Planner, guides you to uncover the goals that matter, make an action plan you can't wait to get started on, and live it out with joy. They do things differently. Cultivate What Matters helps you focus on your progress, not perfection. So we will be giving away a 2020 one-year Power Sheets Intentional Goal Planner along with the 2020 Goal Setting Sticker Book. And this is a $75 value. And this could be yours to help you get 2020 started off on the right foot. I'm so excited for this possibility to just help us in our goal setting. So here are some of the rules and specifics for this giveaway. First, make sure you're following No Wrong Turns Pod if you're not already. Second, comment and tag 2 people on our Cultivate What Matters giveaway post on the No Wrong Turns Instagram or Facebook. 3, repost for extra chances to win. And yes, you may enter as many times as you may like. 4, the giveaway will be open from Tuesday, December 31st, 2019, all the way till next year, Sunday, January 12th, 2020, at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. At that time, a winner will be chosen at random. 5, the winner will be announced in the following No Wrong Turns pod episode that comes out Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, and then shared on our social medias. And 6, this Instagram/Facebook giveaway is not sponsored, endorsed, or administered by or associated with Facebook or Instagram. For more details on the 2020 one-year Power Sheets Intentional Goal Planner, along with the 2020 Goal Setting Sticker Book, please check out cultivatewhatmatters.com.
You were saying, Macy, that after college, you had a job opportunity in Arizona to be a kindergarten teacher. Did you know somebody in Arizona, or was it just a job search kind of thing that you found out about?
Yeah, I didn't know anyone. I went to a teaching job fair, and that's how I got connected to them, and it just seemed like a good fit. And so I did summer mission team right before I was going to go, and I found out that the school there started way sooner than it did in Minnesota. So that meant my kindergartners would have been in school for 3 weeks already, and they would have a substitute teacher for the first 3 weeks. And I just was not okay with that. I was like, they're not going to learn like my classroom rules and system, and I won't be there to have them start and meet their parents. So that was really hard for me. And the youth director that was in the position at the Salvation Army, she had just quit the job, and her husband were going to be missionaries in Europe. So I didn't know, like, I knew that she was quitting the job, and she had asked me if I would be interested in a position, and I just said no. I want to be a teacher, so that's what I'm focusing on. And then the officers came to me and they said, we really think that you would do really well in this position, and we've been praying about it, and we want to offer you this job, and asked me to pray about it. And I was like, really, like, no, I already committed to something. And so, but I did pray about it, and I really felt like the Lord had established that to be where I was supposed to be that year. And so I took the job, and then after I came back from India, I was sick in India from just the food, and just my body couldn't digest food well when I got back. So I spent some time in the hospital, and with being sick, the Salvation Army and the officers there, they were really understanding, and they knew that they could still offer me this position even though I was sick, and that they could accommodate for what I was going through. I did get better, but in that moment, that was just reaffirming that they were on my side and cheering me on, and they were willing to work with me. So yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, that sounds like just like the perfect case of like God's timing and
yes.
all of the situations of having a job, being sick, but having them like hold your job and like waiting for you to get better, and to have that right there waiting for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool of them.
So you had the youth director position.
Yes.
And how long did you have that position for? Or did you change to another job, or what was how long did that work?
So I was a youth director for a little over a year, and new officers actually came in. And before they came in, the Salvation Army moves for pastors came out, and my officers were on the list. And I think that broke me a little. And knowing like, rewind a little before this, at a youth councils, when I was in, I think I was 21, and I was at a youth councils, and they had an altar call for calling people to officership. Come up if you feel called, like God is calling you to this. And I instantly shut down, and I was like, no, not interested. Like, if like I've had people tell me all the time, like, you should go into ministry, you'd be a great officer. And I'm like, God didn't tell me that, so I'm not. I'm like, and he's like, but they would say, God told me. I'm like, well, let God know to tell me. And like joke around with them, like, because that was not something. I loved my job and I loved what I was doing, and it wasn't something I felt, because at that time I was going to school to be a teacher, and I didn't feel called to ministry. And at youth councils when I was 21, they had this altar call, and in my seat, I just felt so uncomfortable, and I instantly just was crying. There was so many tears coming down my face, and I was like, what is going on right now? I'm so confused. And my officer just leaned over to me, and she said, she's like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but can I pray for you? And I said yes. And I knew that God was calling me in that moment to pursue this path of officership, and I wasn't open to it. I outwardly say that maybe I said to her that maybe I could quit school and go to training and do that I was willing and I was open, but I actually wasn't, because soon after youth councils, I immediately dismissed the idea. I was like, nope, I'm not called to do that. I need to finish what I'm doing. And I was really disobedient to what God was calling me to do. And that was, I think that was really a huge part that played into other things. So back to when my officers found out they were getting moved, I just felt broken because I wasn't obedient to God's call. So that meant that they couldn't walk through the process with me of going to training. And I was so mad at myself. Like, why didn't I just trust God's timing? And so I just prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I wrote this letter to my officers, and I just said, sometimes when we're scared or feel like we don't have the ability to do what God is calling us to do, or feel like we're maybe not equipped to do what God is calling us to do, we run away from that. And that was exactly what was happening for me. And I was very disobedient to God's call, and I walked away from what he was ultimately calling me to do. And in that moment, I felt so scared because they wouldn't be there to cheer me on in this process and show me what it meant to be an officer and to go through like the paperwork and everything that comes with that. And so that's when I did start the process. And not that long later, when we got new officers, things just didn't work out for me to be there. They had a different idea of what ministry looked like, and different than what ministry we were already doing. And that was very hard for me. It's a lot of praying, because I did not want to leave. I knew that the teens and the kids there would be hurt if I left, and I wasn't ready for that, and I knew they wouldn't be ready for that. But I knew that God had something different for me, and so I quit my job, and the Salvation Army asked me to do, if I would go to Fargo, North Dakota, and do a ministry discovery program internship for the time I had left before I went to training. And I said yes. So that started a new adventure for me. That was part of God's plan and not just mine.
Wow. So you were in North Dakota for how long before you went to Chicago?
It was less than a year, a little under a year, like 11 months.
And can you explain what CFOT is exactly?
Yeah, CFOT stands for College for Officer Training. And what that means is those in the Salvation Army who are interested in or pursuing to be pastors within the church, they come here for a 2-year program or a 22-month program to learn to kind of be we're not ordained. Well, we are in a way, but it's not the same as seminary. It looks different because it's its own Salvation Army training college. So it's they sometimes will describe it like it's maybe similar to seminary, but it's just so where the Salvation Army can train up and their ministers or their pastors, which they call officers.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that.
Sorry, it was a little rough.
No, that was good. So how long have you been there for now?
I am in my 3rd month now. So the adventure's kind of just started. It started in August, and yeah, it's been crazy, busy, challenging already, but it's been really good too. And I just have so much peace about being here, and I know that God's plan is that being here. I've had like overwhelming peace about being here, and I know that God's plan is bigger than what I could ever imagine. And there's moments where things are challenging or hard or confusing, but there's also moments here where things have been really good, and I've learned a lot. And I know that God is in this time preparing me for full-time ministry.
So when will you graduate?
I'll graduate from the training college in June of 2021.
That sounds so futuristic, doesn't it?
I know. Yes, it does. But it'll be here in no time.
I know. Don't blink. It's going to happen so quick.
Oh, really. It feels like I can't even already believe that we've already been here for as long as we have, because some days it just feels like we just got here, but I know that we've already done so many things. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Macy, for sharing your story and just letting us see through your story how your passions have grown and been transformed and to the place where you are today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed sharing with you. Thank you.
No, thank you. I have one question left that I am asking all of the No Wrong Turns podcast guests, and that is, what is fueling you today? What's fueling your passion? That could be anything from a new show you discovered on Netflix to a new favorite part of town to a new restaurant. So what's fueling you today?
While being here, before I got here, I met a friend. Her name is Shannon, and we met through summer mission team, and we kind of went through this process of going to training together, like the paperwork process, doctor's appointments, and we would chat a lot. And being here and being with her has been so awesome, because just having, like, what's fueling me right now is like friendship and someone who can encourage and push me and challenge me, and that has been so awesome. And I've been really just so thankful for her and being able to learn together. So
that's awesome. I think it's really great that you already have somebody that's been like with you in this process, so you can kind of lean on each other, bounce things back and forth, and not feel like alone during this time.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's been really great having her.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the podcast, Macy.
Thank you, Audrey.
Friends, I have loved getting to chat with Macy and hearing her story about how and why she developed her passion for teaching children. I hope that we are all encouraged today about how Macy found her passion and then worked through and decided how and what her vocation was going to be to use her passion in. You might be like Macy and have a passion that has a seemingly traditional vocation. But like Macy, maybe you need to keep your eyes and heart open to other vocations that use your passion. My prayer for you is that you would consider what God has for you and what He might be leading you to. A quick reminder for you that in my next episode, I will be sharing the winner of our first giveaway with Cultivate What Matters 2020 1-year Power Sheets Intentional Goal Planner, along with our 2020 Goal Setting Sticker Book. This will be announced in our next episode, which is coming out on January 14th, 2020. To enter, you simply need to make sure you're following the at No Wrong Turns pod if you're not already. Comment and tag 2 people on our Cultivate What Matters giveaway post on either Facebook or Instagram. Repost for extra chances to win. Yes, you can repost and post and comment as many times as you like. 4th, the contest is open from today, December 31st, to Sunday, January 12th. 2020 at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. The winner will be announced on the No Wrong Turns pod episode that comes out Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, and also shared on our social medias. For more details about Cultivate What Matters, check out their website at cultivatewhatmatters.com and join us in 2 weeks for our next episode drop. Please see the show notes for our music credits.